Ooh, look at this. Nice rainy day. And of course, there's not a smidgen of sun the whole morning. Turn on the video and the sun starts to shine. Oh, that feels delicious. Oh, the sun. That feels good. So, what did I want to talk to you about today? I wanted to talk to you today about the difference between permaculture and organic gardening. What's the difference? You see? How do you like this? I have my chairs covered for the rain. That's it. Everything is winterized except I have to find a way to close these guys up so that they don't get really, really cold and that I don't have to think about them during the cold, rainy season. What do you think? Will it snow this year? Sometimes it does. Despite the fact that it's threatening to rain again, I think I can sit outside for this video. What is the difference between permaculture and organic? A lot of people get that confused. They think that just because something is organic, it's permaculture, or they think, well, if it's permaculture, it's automatically organic, and people confuse the two. They also confuse permaculture with regenerative, and the truth is all of these terms are very confusing for people who don't understand farming methods, don't understand gardening that much, people who are new to it. And even if for people who are avid gardeners, these new terms, permaculture, regenerative, I mean, they understand what organic is, but what are those other terms? So I want to clear those up today. Organic gardening is something that everyone is familiar with. It's where there are no synthetic chemicals added to the ground. However, chemicals are used in order to kill pests, in order to fertilize the ground, but they're more natural. Permaculture is also organic farming. However, there are no chemical inputs whatsoever. The permaculture philosophy is to set up an infrastructure that will allow for the area to be completely self-sufficient, that even if you're not there, it will continue to thrive. Regenerative farming takes it a step further, and they focus on rebuilding soil. It's a closed system where they use animals and intensive planting to create waste, which then becomes food for other animals or organisms, so that the system can remain a closed system. Permaculture's goal is that you eventually step out of the cycle. You don't need to always be there, whereas regenerative, you are an integral part of the cycle because you're constantly building new. I use a combination of permaculture and regenerative. I don't do much with my yard. You guys know how my garden is. I add nothing to it. So it's not organic because I don't use any chemicals whatsoever. It is permaculture because I am building up a situation where I don't have to be a part of it in order to maintain it. But I'm also using regenerative tools in building the soil, because the soil here is not very productive. It's not incredibly fertile. It is. It's quite fertile when it comes to certain weeds, but it gets used up really, really fast. So especially since we don't have water for 9 months out of the year, and when we do have water, it's cold, so the soil doesn't build up as much as it could. So I'm trying to build up the soil as much as possible, and I do that through using mulch. I do that through the animal waste. I do that by not disturbing the soil if possible, which is one of the reasons why I use container gardens. And I find that that combination has worked out very, very well for my garden. And actually, a lot of the health has spilled over into my neighbors' gardens, which I just find fantastic, and so do they. Don't get hung up on the terms. Don't get hung up on the terms. I think that different types of gardening are good for different types of people. Some people have the time and really enjoy being out there playing in the soil, getting their hands dirty, growing intensively all of their vegetables. And for them, organic gardening is most likely necessary. Yes, you can do a permaculture kitchen garden, and you can do a regenerative kitchen garden. It requires more work, it requires more care, but it can be done. And for people who have the time, great, amazing. But if somebody doesn't have the time, and those, that bagged bone meal or the bottled fish emulsion, as long as those things are pure, then why not? Growing something organically is better than growing nothing. And I think that people get hung up on the terms. They get hung up on the titles, and they become fearful about, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? And I think that instead of focusing on, am I doing it right? I think people should be focusing on doing no harm. So as long as you're not adding synthetic chemicals to the ground, as long as you're not adding supplements that could create an imbalance in the soil, then everything's fine. I don't add chemicals because I want my garden to be able to thrive on its own and to utilize the resources that are close by. We have so many resources. Every neighborhood has resources. I look around, even in the city, there are so many resources naturally in the city that there's no, at least where I live, there's no excuse to add chemicals. And sometimes those chemicals, if you add fertilizers and other additives to the soil, it creates imbalances, which then in turn invites bugs and unwanted things into your garden. And then you have to use sprays in order to get rid of those. And it's just this endless cycle of chemical use. And for me, no, I'll do the regenerative and the permaculture. I worked hard at the infrastructure to begin with. It took me a while, but now that the infrastructure is laid, there's almost no work. Like I barely touched my garden this year. Anyway, I hope that clears it up for you what the terms are, and I hope that for those of you who would like to do permaculture and they only think of themselves as organic, that maybe they might get an understanding of, well, they're doing permaculture and they're doing organic at the same time. Like, there can be a combination. There are so many ways to do it right. And as long as you're doing no harm, you're doing it right. So I hope that clears everything up. Until next time.